I never imagined that one night, one argument, could change everything. My family had always been loud, opinionated, passionate, sometimes even a little chaotic, but at the end of the day, we always found our way back to each other. That night, however, something snapped, and nothing was ever the same again. It started out like any other family dinner. My parents, my older sister, Emma, my younger brother, Jake, and I sat around the dining table, the smell of roasted chicken and mashed potatoes filling the air. It was supposed to be a simple evening, but tension lingered beneath the surface, unspoken words pressing against us like a dam about to burst. Dad had barely touched his food, his usual humor absent. Mom kept glancing at him, chewing her lip like she was holding something back. Emma, always the peacekeeper, was trying to fill the silence with small talk, while Jake was glued to his phone, oblivious to the storm brewing. Then, it happened. "So, when were you going to tell us?" Dad finally broke the silence, his voice dangerously calm as he turned to Emma. She froze mid-bite, her fork clinking against the plate. "Tell you what?" Dad slammed his fist on the table, making all of us jump. "That you're moving across the country." We had to hear it from Aunt Linda. Mom exhaled sharply, and I saw her shoulders tighten. "Frank, please." "No, Susan," he shot back. "Our daughter is leaving for Seattle, and we have to find out from my sister?" Emma set her fork down, her expression hardening. "I was going to tell you. I just needed time." "Time?" Dad scoffed. "For what? To disappear without a word? To pretend like we don't matter?" "That's not fair," she shot back. "I didn't tell you because I knew you'd react exactly like this." The room erupted. Mom tried to mediate, her voice overlapping with Dad's furious accusations. Emma stood her ground, her own frustration boiling over. Jake finally looked up from his phone, wide-eyed but silent. And me? I just sat there, watching my family unravel right in front of me, feeling powerless to stop it. Voices rose, words sharpened like knives, and then, out of nowhere, came the sentence that changed everything. "Maybe it's better if we all just go our separate ways," Dad muttered under his breath. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Emma grabbed her plate and stood up. "You know what? Maybe you're right." She stormed off, her chair scraping against the floor, and moments later, we heard the front door slam shut. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The once warm and familiar dining room felt foreign, like we had stepped into someone else's home. I looked at my parents, at Jake, at the empty chair where Emma had been sitting, and I wondered, was this the night my family fell apart? The tension in our family had been building for months, maybe even years, but no one wanted to admit it. We all walked on eggshells around each other, pretending everything was fine while resentment simmered beneath the surface. But it was only a matter of time before everything exploded. It started with something small. A simple disagreement at the dinner table. My dad made an offhand comment about my cousin's new job, and my uncle scoffed. "Must be nice to get everything handed to you," he muttered under his breath. My cousin, Jason, slammed his fork down. "What's that supposed to mean?" he shot back. My uncle, never one to back down from a challenge, leaned forward. "It means some of us had to work for what we have. Not all of us had the luxury of handouts." The air grew thick with tension. My aunt tried to change the subject, but it was too late. The dam had cracked, and the flood was coming. "You've always been jealous of Jason," my mom said, shaking her head. "Ever since he got into college, you've had a chip on your shoulder." "Oh, come on," my uncle scoffed. "We all know who the favorite is in this family. Everything Jason touches turns to gold while the rest of us are left to struggle." At that point, my dad stepped in, his voice sharp. "That's enough. We're family. We don't need to do this." But my uncle wasn't done. He turned his attention to me. "And what about you? You sit there all quiet, like you're better than the rest of us. Maybe you've got the same privilege as Jason, huh?" I felt my face flush. "I've worked hard for everything I have," I said through gritted teeth. "Oh yeah? And what about when your parents helped you out last year? Paid your rent when you were struggling? Must be nice to have a safety net." I clenched my fists. I wasn't ashamed of the help my parents had given me, but his words cut deep. Was that how the rest of the family saw me? As someone who didn't earn my place? Jason stood up, pushing his chair back so hard it nearly fell over. "You know what? I'm sick of this. You act like I've never worked a day in my life, like I haven't earned what I have. I'm sorry you feel left behind, but that's not my fault." "Oh, you're sick of it?" My uncle sneered. "Try being treated like an outsider in your own family. Try being ignored at every holiday while everyone sings your praises. My mom tried to interject. No one is ignoring you. You're making this into something it's not. My uncle laughed bitterly. Of course, you'd say that. You're part of the problem. The voices in the room grew louder, overlapping, as years of unspoken frustrations came crashing into the open. Accusations flew back and forth, voices laced with anger, disappointment, and years of pent-up resentment. I glanced at my dad, hoping he would step in again, but he just rubbed his temples, looking exhausted. My aunt was crying, my mom was shaking her head in disbelief, and Jason was fuming. The family dinner we had all agreed to was officially ruined. I had always thought that no matter how bad things got, we'd find a way to fix them. But as I looked around the room, I realized something terrifying. This time, we might not. The days following the explosive argument were eerily silent. No more morning phone calls from my mom. No more random texts from my siblings. It was as if a wall had been built between us overnight, and no one was willing to be the first to break it down. At first, I told myself I didn't care. I was still angry. The things that were said during the argument were not just hurtful, they were deeply personal. It wasn't just about one incident, it was years of resentment, favoritism, and unresolved pain bubbling to the surface. But as time went on, the weight of that silence grew heavier. One afternoon, I sat alone in my apartment, scrolling through old family photos on my phone. Pictures of birthdays, vacations, even just casual Sunday dinners. There we were, laughing, hugging, existing as if nothing could ever come between us. I had always believed that no matter what, my family would always be my foundation. But now, it felt like we were all standing on separate islands, unwilling to bridge the gap. Then, my phone lit up with a notification. A text. From Aunt Linda. I heard about what happened. I'm sorry, honey. I know how hard this must be for you. But is cutting them off really the answer? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I didn't know how to respond. Was I cutting them off? Or had they cut me off? Who was to blame for this silence? Before I could reply, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my cousin, Rachel. Hey, just wanted to check in. This whole situation sucks, but I miss you. That message hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. Someone actually missed me. Someone outside the argument, outside the anger, still cared. I took a deep breath. Maybe this wasn't just about proving a point anymore. Maybe it was about figuring out what mattered more, being right or having a family to go back to. I decided I needed to do something, but I wasn't ready to face my parents just yet. Instead, I called my sister, Emily. If anyone could help me make sense of this, it was her. She picked up after the third ring. Wow, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I was starting to think you'd fallen off the face of the earth. I let out a weak chuckle. Yeah, well, I guess I needed some time. A pause. Then, softer, me too. We both sat in silence for a moment. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was just heavy. Listen, I finally said, I don't want things to stay like this forever. But I also don't know how to fix it. Emily sighed. I get it. Honestly, I feel like everyone is just waiting for someone else to make the first move. That stuck with me. Everyone was waiting. Waiting for an apology. Waiting for someone to be the bigger person. Waiting for time to somehow fix what words had broken. But time alone wasn't enough. I took a deep breath. What if we do something about it? Together? Emily hesitated. Like what? I don't know yet, but we can't just keep pretending we don't care. She was quiet for a moment, then, okay, let's figure it out. That was the first step. It wasn't a resolution, it wasn't an apology, but it was something, and for the first time in weeks, it felt like maybe, just maybe, this family wasn't as broken as I thought. The plan was simple, a family meeting. Emily and I agreed that we couldn't let this silence stretch on forever. The wounds were fresh, but if we waited too long, they might scar over in ways that could never fully heal. So, after a long conversation, we decided to take the first step. I sent a message in the family group chat. We need to talk. No yelling, no blaming, just talking. Can we meet at Mom and Dad's on Sunday? No immediate response. Minutes stretched into an hour. My stomach churned. Maybe they didn't care anymore. Maybe the damage was already done. Then, one by one, the replies trickled in. First Emily, then Rachel, then Aunt Linda, and finally, my mom. Fine. That was all she wrote. It wasn't the warmest response, but it was a start. Sunday arrived, and I found myself standing on my parents' doorstep, heart pounding. I hadn't seen them since the argument, and I didn't know what to expect. When the door swung open, my father was standing there, arms crossed. No smile, no warmth, just a nod. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. The atmosphere inside was thick with unspoken words. Mom was in the kitchen, arms folded, eyes darting between me and Emily. Rachel sat on the couch, shifting uncomfortably. Aunt Linda perched on a chair, the unofficial referee of our family battles. I took a deep breath and sat down. "Thank you for coming." No one spoke. The silence was deafening. I cleared my throat. "Look, I know things got out of hand last time. And I don't want to argue anymore. I just want to understand each other." Mom let out a sharp breath, shaking her head. "Understand? You think we don't understand? You think we haven't been trying?" My fists clenched involuntarily. "Stay calm. Stay in control. I'm not saying that. I just feel like I've never been heard. That's all I want now, for everyone to actually listen." Aunt Linda leaned forward. "Maybe we should start by acknowledging that everyone is hurting. No one wins when a family is divided like this." That seemed to diffuse some of the tension. Dad exhaled deeply, rubbing his temples. "All right, let's talk." And so, we did. For the first time in what felt like forever, we actually listened. I spoke about how I had always felt overshadowed, like my voice was never as important as the others. How I had spent years trying to prove my worth, only to feel like it was never enough. Mom's eyes flickered with something. "Regret, maybe?" "I never meant to make you feel that way," she admitted softly. I thought I was doing what was best." My throat tightened. "I know, Mom, but what's best isn't always what's fair." Emily chimed in, finally finding her voice. "And it's not just about the past. We keep hurting each other because we never deal with things. We let them pile up until they explode." Rachel nodded. "Maybe it's time we stop pretending we're fine and actually work on fixing things." Dad, who had been mostly silent, sighed. "I don't have all the answers. But I do know that I don't want this family to fall apart." Neither did I. Mom hesitated before reaching across the table, placing her hand over mine. It wasn't an apology, not in words at least. But it was something, and for now, it was enough. That night, as I walked out of my parents' house, the weight on my chest felt a little lighter. We weren't fixed. Not yet, but for the first time in a long time, I believed we could be. The house had been silent for weeks. What was once a place filled with laughter, conversations, and shared meals had become nothing more than a collection of isolated rooms occupied by people who barely acknowledged each other. The argument had fractured our family, leaving behind an uncomfortable stillness that none of us knew how to break. I sat on my bed, scrolling through old photos on my phone. Pictures of birthdays, vacations, and casual dinners flooded my screen, reminders of a time when we actually enjoyed being together. I sighed, realizing that no matter how right I thought I was during the argument, none of it mattered if it cost me my family. Was it really worth losing everything over proving a point? That evening, I finally gathered the courage to take the first step. I walked into the living room, where my dad was sitting in his usual chair, reading. My mom was in the kitchen, pretending to be busy, though I knew she was just avoiding another confrontation. My siblings were in their rooms, doors shut tight, blocking out the tension that had become a permanent presence in our home. I cleared my throat. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice hesitant but firm. Dad lowered his book, giving me a skeptical glance. Mom peeked around the kitchen doorway, her eyes wary. One by one, my siblings emerged from their rooms, curiosity drawing them toward the living room. No one spoke at first. The weight of our unresolved argument lingered in the air, making everything feel fragile, like a single wrong word could shatter whatever was left of our family. I took a deep breath and spoke the words I had been avoiding. "I miss us. I miss when we could just sit together without feeling like we were walking on eggshells. I don't even know if we'll ever agree on what happened, but I know that I don't want to lose you all over this." Mom sighed, crossing her arms. "It's not that simple." "I know it's not," I admitted. "But maybe we can start by just talking again. No yelling, no blaming, just talking." My younger brother, who had been one of the most upset during the fight, nodded. "I miss us too," he murmured. Dad put his book down completely. "So, where do we go from here?" That was the real question. There was no magic solution, no perfect fix that would erase the damage overnight. But at that moment, we all knew one thing. We didn't want this distance anymore. We started small, sitting together for dinner, even if it was mostly in silence at first. Slowly, conversations became easier, laughter found its way back into our home, and the walls we had built between us began to crack. Apologies came, not all at once, but in pieces. Sometimes in the form of actual words, sometimes in the form of simple gestures, Dad making Mom her morning coffee again, my siblings and I watching TV together without tension hanging between us. Healing wasn't immediate, but it was happening. And in the end, we realized something important. No argument, no matter how intense, was worth losing our family over. We had nearly let pride and anger break us apart for good. But taking that first step, choosing to move forward rather than dwell in resentment, was what saved us. And as we sat together for the first real family dinner in weeks, I knew one thing for certain. We weren't perfect, but we were still a family. And that was enough. Family conflicts can be incredibly painful, especially when they lead to silence and separation. Have you ever experienced a major argument that changed your family dynamics? How did you handle it? Let's talk about it in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you found this story relatable or helpful, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe for more real-life stories that spark conversation and reflection. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.